The day is January 10th of 1837, and smoke rises over the trees of a Floridian swamp. A village burns as American soldiers scour the smoldering ruins for their enemy, whom was reported to have taken refuge within the village. Any who remained in the village faced either death or an even worse fate of being captured and sold into the slave trade. However, the person these soldiers were looking for, Osceola, was already gone. In 1813, a group of black Seminole, which were escaped slaves that had fled to the Seminole for refuge and adopted their customs, settled on the shores of Lake Panasoffkee. They decided to name their village Second after an Alachua Seminole who lived in the area. The village was known to be used for councils and was even the site of a ceremony known as the Green Corn Dance, which Europeans gave the name busk, possibly a corruption of the Creek word for a fast, pasquita. This ceremony of purification and manhood featured hours of methodical, single-file type of dancing known as stomp dancing. In the village of Second, corn, rice, and sugarcane were grown, and hogs, horses, and cows were raised. They also planted one of Florida's oldest orange groves. However, 1835 would see the massacre of Major Francis Dade and his soldiers by the Seminole leader Micanopy, and war would be declared soon after. The same day as the Dade Massacre, December 28th, would see Osceola attack Fort King in modern Ocala, killing 7 American soldiers, including a personal enemy of his, an American representative named Wiley Thompson. By early 1836, the American Army put itself on the offensive, with Major General Winfield Scott in charge of the war effort. Scott's initial plan was to trap the Seminole force at the mouth of the Withlacoochee River and defeat them there with 3 columns converging into a force of 5,000 men. But all of the columns were delayed, one more so due to stopping and burning the Seminole village of modern Palatka, then called Abrahamstown. However, the delay gave the Seminole time to abandon the village at the mouth of the Withlacoochee. The next few months of campaigning proved fruitless for the U.S. Army, and by April, the Seminole took the offensive. 3 forts were attacked: Fort Barnwell near modern Volusia, Fort Drain near modern Gainesville, and Fort Alabama near Fort Brooke in modern Tampa. Fort Alabama was abandoned due to the attack, and even Fort King was abandoned by late May. On July 23rd, the Cape, Florida lighthouse was attacked and burned, and wouldn't be repaired until 1846. And by June, Scott was recalled to Washington to answer for his failures. And in the interim between commanders, the war fell to Florida's territorial governor, Richard Call. In October, Call attempted another attack at the Withlacoochee's mouth, but by the time they reached the river, it was flooded, and the soldiers couldn't cross due to harassment by the Seminole. When the expedition ran out of supplies, Call was forced to turn back. By mid-November, Call tried again, and his forces entered the Wahoo Swamp on November 21st. However, the Seminole were ready for them. Call ordered his riflemen to charge into the hammock, while cavalry defended their flanks. However, a massive volley of gunfire opened up from the tree line. As the American riflemen charged into the hammock, the Seminole held their line. As the Americans charged, Seminole forces attacked both of their flanks, and a small force came from behind, encircling the Americans. The battle raged for an hour, and by the time the Seminole dispersed into the swamp, 25 Seminoles were dead, with 3 Americans dead and 18 wounded. The Americans chased the Seminole deeper into the Wahoo Swamp, eventually finding another Seminole force and following them to the main force as they retreated. The main force of Seminole was on the other side of a creek from the American force, and the firefight would take place at the creek, with a large battle ensuing, and the Seminole not fleeing until the entirety of the American force was upon them. In the second engagement, Call's force suffered 9 dead, and the Seminole lost between 10 and 50. The war did not reach Second or Lake Panasoffkee initially, but in the aftermath of the Battle of Wahoo Swamp, Osceola came to seek refuge here. As it is believed, he was suffering from malaria at the time. However, on December 9th of 1836, Governor Call was relieved of duty and replaced by General Thomas Jessup. Jessup would immediately launch a manhunt for Osceola, finding the village in early January of 1837. On January 10th, Jessup ordered a raid on the village, but Osceola was already gone, escaping with 50 warriors and their families. Jessup was only able to capture the 16 Seminole who chose to stay behind. By the end of January, the situation was beginning to look dire for the Seminole, and many began to surrender themselves to be sent west. By the end of May, even Micanopy had surrendered, but Osceola remained defiant. On June 2nd, Osceola and another Seminole leader, Sam Jones, entered the poorly guarded Fort Brooke and escaped with over 700 Seminole prisoners of war. The war was on again, and this time it was personal. Editing Tim here, so while Micanopy did surrender in June of 1837, he was freed by Osceola and then was present during the quote-unquote peace talks with General Jessup. On October 21st, 1837, Osceola went to Fort Peyton near St. Augustine to engage in peace talks with General Jessup. However, instead of peace, Jessup would have Osceola and his 81 followers imprisoned under a white flag in what is considered one of the most disgraceful acts in U.S. military history. Osceola was immediately sent to Fort Marion in St. Augustine, then Fort Moultrie outside Charleston, South Carolina, where Osceola died on January 30th, 1838. Jessup carried this shame with him for the rest of his life. Sam Jones, whose real name was Abiaka, would take the Seminole further south, accompanied by the black Seminole leader, John Horse, and the war would continue until 1842, when peace would finally return to the Floridian Peninsula, but at great cost to the Seminole. Thanks for watching.